something like that.
What-
I want to start just by just general impressions of this chapter, because it was very different for me than the other chapters. How did you guys feel?
Well, it was more personal.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, talk about how these, before it was objective, it was this is what's happening in the world. And now it's about this is what's happening in you and me.
Yeah. Yeah.
That we're buying into it, and that
Yeah.
we're part of the problem.
Yeah.
So we're not just observers, we're now participants.
It is much simpler, isn't it, Ed, to say you're the problem. Yeah.
No, I'm more kind of curious to where he's going, in the sense that, you know, he's plowing through, you know, a good, you know, history, social studies, whatever you want to call it, from the, you know, left, which is fine. I mean, it's all, you know, it's all true. You know, nothing, you know, no, there were personal things that all been predicted helping people with problems, all that, but you know, where is, you know, do I need to shift to the last chapter and find out exactly how he's going to implement revolutionary love? You know, that's,
Yeah. Where do we get there? Yeah.
I'm, you know, I wonder if that's some other people's problem. I mean, it's kind of, you know, if you're in chapter by chapter, we got what, 4 more chapters to go? Till
I'm
7?
five after this one.
5 more. Okay.
Yeah, 5 after this one.
You know,
So-
but, and, you know, I mean, I haven't skipped ahead, but I mean, you know, again, I'm concerned about his building to his ultimate conclusion, and I kind of want to get there a little faster than perhaps he wants me to take me there.
Yeah, I get why though too, especially because this one right here makes us look deeply to say, what is it that is standing in my personal way, right? What's the self-blame that I'm doing? How is it that I'm not living up to expectations, so to speak? Because if it's all about self-fulfillment, how many of us feel at least partially unself-fulfilled at times,
Oh yeah.
right? I mean, it's almost an impossible thing to be completely in that space of completely right.
Well, part of it is the question of almost relevancy. I mean, you know, if we're kind of in that kind of, you know, whatever, because of the way this thing is structured, then it's kind of a, you know, downward swirling, you know, rat hole in that regard.
That's right. And at least that's,
But I mean, that's not, I mean, it's just, it's a societal thing he's talking about, not so much individuals. I mean, all individuals make up society, but it's not pointed at, you know, an individual. He's saying that's what's going on, you know, almost generically. And okay, fine.
Yeah.
But how do we, again, how do we reverse this? And we know the problem. We you know, it's well diagnosed in this part. How do we make a difference? You know, what's the structure that's going to get us there?
yeah. But think about, like, one of the things you'll hear very often in religion, I'm spiritual but not religious. And sometimes what people mean by that, I'll go work on myself, but not on us. I'll listen to God voice in me, but not God voice from you.
No, that's the whole, you know, that's the whole thing. One of the problems with community organizing is the people want to say, you know, institutional power analysis and all that. People can't bring themselves into that and get out, you know. Anyway, so that's why, you know, if people keep going around the inside themselves, we're never going to get collectively power to move ahead, you know.
Yeah, yeah. And that's one of the major things. How do you get people into the act of doing something?
All right. Does he
Right.
answer that question by chapter 10 or not?
Well,
We'll get some of those answers as we move along. The problem is, of course, you can't get that answer perfectly, no matter how much you do, because remember, just the title of the whole book is revolutionary love,
Sure, I
which
know, yeah.
is about relationship.
Well, it's
And how many,
it's a double pejorative almost in that sense, you know, that,
in that way it is almost, isn't it? I mean, but think
yeah,
about this, Art. Here's what I know about you. I hear that you had the most amazingly fantastic wife ever. I've heard that so many times, right? That Gay was an absolutely incredible person. So you probably had no problem at all ever in your marriage loving or being loved.
I don't, you know, we had our nothing, we had our struggles obviously at times, but nothing, catastrophic or anything like that, right? You know, it was, you know, we had our own way of doing things and,
Yeah.
individually, collectively.
Well, and that's the difficulty with love, though, is that you have all those struggles, but there's something more that carries us through than just the struggle. In fact, sometimes being in the midst of the struggle with a person that you love actually enhances that struggle, right? So in community
Sure, yeah, you
organizing,
learn. You know, that's the whole thing. Hopefully you learn
that's
from
right.
that experience. Yes, absolutely.
And so in community organizing, for example, you may not start at the same place, but if you can bring people into a relationship and help them find in that relationship the progress forward, whether they're completely successful or not, they'll continue in that relationship.
Well, you know, right. And, I mean, you know, the whole IF drill in terms of individual meetings and then, you know, groups and you know, looking for leadership talent and all that.
That's right.
Inside the institutional framework, you know, and
yeah. And at least part of that, I think, is an attempt to address the second side of the title of the chapter, powerlessness. Right? What in life places you in a space where you sense powerless more? Okay, here's an easy one for me. When my wife wants me to go shopping with her, I easily enter into a space of powerlessness. Like, you're outside of my element, you're outside of my likes and desires, you're outside of what makes me feel comfortable and at ease. I feel powerless in a very real way there. That's a simple example, but life throws us into that very often, doesn't it? In some way or another. And what do we do about those places of powerlessness?
part of it is trade-offs. Okay, I'll do that for you. Hopefully, you'll do something for me. And which, you know, just, you know, I'll go along with you just because you want me to go along, not because I want to go along. And so, you know, the quid pro quo that. You and Becky have never had that experience, right?
Yeah. Well, you know, for me, this chapter goes beyond just the two things that he focuses on, how we bought in to the ethos of competition and you know, the material rewards as a measurement. As I grew up watching the movements of the 60s, 70s, 80s, and such, I was impressed at how a lot of the leaders of protests of those were in for an ego trip, and their tactics were destructive. And I really marveled that Martin Luther King was able to bring people along who could drop all of their sense of hatred and resentment for the kind of treatment they'd been, and resentment of the treatment they were receiving as they marched. That he somehow was able to free them from that, where they could really be peaceful protesters. That's a huge inner gain when people can reach that kind of space.
Sure.
So I'm very impressed with not just what actions we do and what we choose to give ourselves to, but how we do it. Because the how makes all the difference in the world as to what the effect of the action is going to be, both for us and for society as a whole.
And part of the reason how he did that, Ed, was because he showed them power that they had that I'm not certain that they realized before he spoke it to them. So think about Rosa Parks, whose birthday it is today, by the way.
Ah.
Black America, Black Alabamans heard on a regular basis, you don't have power. You can't affect this. And in many ways, that was very true. They didn't have a whole lot of economic power. They were definitely at the lower ends of all the economics. They didn't have governmental power as a general rule.
No voting power.
But he found, or he and his advisors, I don't know who came up with the idea to do all this, and said, but the bus company depends on you. Bus company doesn't need white America, white Alabamans to ride the bus. They need you to do it. And so if you boycott the bus, suddenly you have some power.
You're in the pocketbook.
Yep. And that's part of what we have to do, is we have to sit in that space that no matter how much power we don't have, what is the power that we do have? And how do we exercise that?
Gandhi did that too with his making salt.
Uh-huh.
Water, and so that portion of British industry, the salt industry, got killed off in that enterprise.
Yeah.
And the textiles, clothing, when the people began making their own clothes. Yeah.
And you could say in Arizona, for example, anybody that's on the left is relatively powerless. We have the left has rarely controlled any of the spaces of state power. Occasionally we've had a governor. Sometimes we've had one or another part of the legislature, but not very often, right?
Nope.
But one of my heroes, and it goes back to when I very first came here to Arizona, and within my first 5 years, I got to know a man who was never, ever in the majority in our legislature. Never. And yet he was continually respected as one of the most important people in Arizona legislature, and that's Art Hamilton, if you know him.
I know
An
very well.
amazing man from Phoenix who somehow wielded power beyond the numbers game, right? And how did he manage that in a state like Arizona? And how do we do the same thing, right? Because there's a high chance that Republicans will always have the majority of Arizona. Maybe not, but there's a high chance of it. So how do we, in the midst of that powerlessness, how do we find power?
Well, I had an illustration when I was up in Phoenix. We were being trained how to spend 5 minutes in talking to the state legislature about an issue. Every one of us except one, a Muslim woman, all the rest of us, well, I guess I didn't do it, but we got on a soapbox and lectured the legislature about their ethics and self-righteousness and all. She got up and she talked about the issue of how they were wasting taxpayers' money by allowing drug companies to sell the raw ingredients for one of the major drugs that was being manufactured, and how that was affecting our child support and all kinds of other things, and we had to spend money on because we were allowing the wholesale manufacture of drugs, because these were not people could buy 100 or 200 bottles at a time, no restrictions. And so she spoke to what they cared about instead of about our own self-righteousness, which is just an example of where we come from. Makes the world of difference.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But
And do we take the time to be in that space?
But part of that whole idea of a discussion is the fact that understanding where the particular elected official is that you're speaking with, and you know, engaging him or her at some level of their interest, rather than just kind of, you know, making your statement. Well, that's fine, but you know, how are you building? What are you doing to build a relationship so that he or she is interested in you, about what you have to say, how you might influence other people, or have ideas that might be useful. And you know, it's all about, that's what a lot of people understand. You know, it's great to come in and get on your soapbox and have your time, but it's not going to really make any real difference in terms of how that legislator perceives you as someone who can work with you, might be able to, we may accomplish something. Now, of course, sometimes it is you're totally off base. You know, they're not interested in the topic, period. But probably those are the cases you don't even get to see them. I mean, I've worked all sides of that. So, a lot of this is how do we stand on a soapbox and pontificate, or do we try to figure out where people are and build relationships?
And he addressed that in the midst of probably about halfway through the chapter, where he said that sometimes what we do is think that to be rational means that we have to maximize our self-interest. And I think what he was trying to say with that is that true rationality is trying to figure out how to maximize not just the small me, but the larger me, and to see you as me, see your interests as important as what my interests are. And that's hard for us to do because obviously we each understand our own perspective the easiest. But to step into that space where we allow that other person to speak and have a true space is essential if we truly want to be effective. And giving them power, essentially, by being able to speak their story, brings more power to us.
Yeah.
Which, again, going back to what you said, Art, those meetings where you sit and you just talk to somebody else are essential. So that I care about, like I remember some of the people I've sat with in PCIC meetings, and I go, oh, I'm so glad I know the director down at the food bank, so that it's not just a faceless place I could send some food, but it's, somebody that I know is there. Even Martha McSally, when PCIC has met with her, and I never enjoyed the meetings we had, but I felt like she was something other than just that governmental person. I didn't always think that was a good thing, but I felt like I knew her, and I'd stepped into at least some kind of relationship with her.
Yeah. The very fact that you were able to gain access to her, that she would have a conversation with you is a strong testimony.
But that happened more at the beginning of our time together rather than the end of the time she was in office. By the end of the office, it felt like she was very closed door. And that's easy to get. I get why someone is that way, but it's not necessarily helpful.
And our society doesn't help that because, people break into something and harangue, disrupt meetings because they think that's the way to influence, get power, whatever. That's the whole reason why Martha McSally did that gathering, at St. Francis at that time was because it was going to be 400 people that were going to hammer at her.
They were going to question her and question her hard.
And that's fine, but maybe 10 people out of that group, having a conversation with her someplace may in fact accomplish as much or more. The power of numbers is both, well, I mean, that's one of the, is both strength and also a problem. It's a, I mean, I remember that very well in many instances that, how do elected officials respond to large groups of people, And,
Yeah.
and nowadays, I think it used to be better and open more, nowadays it's just, it's crazy, it's just not, I don't, how we get out of the box in that regard is, I go back to the halcyon days of the 80s and 90s when you could actually talk with people.
Yeah. I think one of the difficult parts about our governmental system right now is that, so like when America started, the number of people that the average senator represented was less than the what the mayor of Phoenix represents, right? And now it's enormous, right? And I would even say probably less people than what the mayor of Tucson represents in many cases. And so a representative, which was meant to be in a very real way the guy down the block, now represents a pretty huge amount of people, and it's much more difficult to have a close relationship to that person.
Oh, it's very easy, attend one of their campaign meetings and plunk down $100 and you're in the meeting and talk to them. I mean, that's,
yeah. You can at least pay for an access that way.
yeah. I mean, I support candidates, gladly, but I always will pick, put in the Democrats, I had to pick and do it when there's an event. Then I get something for my money, and usually just be able to say, how are you doing? Good to see you again. I've known Ann Kirkpatrick for 15 years, and a reminder of when we first met and all that, and it's fun that way.
The tough part about that, and I don't think you're wrong, Art, is that in some ways it just goes back to where he started, that self-fulfillment became our major theme. So if I can give you some money, so I enhance your campaign, and then you listen to my voice. In some ways, my goal would be that you listen to my voice whether or not I'm supporting you, and that's harder for a politician to do.
In fairness to Democrats ask for some money, but really you can show up, they want, you show up and don't pay anything. There's nothing that, that's the good part. You don't literally, but the fact that someone holds this at their house and when they have people there with snacks and all that, and conversation, you have 30 people around, and you get the answers. You can answer a question personally and directly, and that's what it's all about. To be able to have that kind of, but you have to put yourself out in order to do it.
Yeah.
But that's me. That's who I am.
Trying to figure out how to do love, revolutionary love, is a hard process. Right now, for example, I've always tried really hard to talk to my Republican friends, and I don't like it right now. I don't want to right now. And yet maybe that's when we need to talk the most, right?
Well, of course, the Republican Party is so fractionated, and at this point, that what I call the true Republicans, are hunkered down. The Jeff Flakes, for instance, so.
At the end of the chapter, he said something I think that's really important in this whole discussion. He said what most people seek is love, respect, and work that provides a sense of meaning and purpose. And I look at those three things and I go, yeah, that's kind of what I like, right? That's kind of what I want and need in life. And am I on a regular basis fulfilling at least one of those things in my discussions? Or am I saying, you dirty rat, you suck at everything you do and you have no worth? You know, and all of that. And I may be right about that, but in saying it, am I defeating my own self?
Well, I must confess that I don't have, people of that side of the political spectrum that I can, engage with. I've got one classmate that I really should want to reach out to and to see where he's at this point. Um, but I never, part of the things he loves to play games with you, and hide up is what his real feeling is, and that's another problem. Is that people play roles when you want to know, okay, what let's cut to the quick and let's talk about real stuff.
I know, and I've got a friend of mine who, I don't know if I told you about her. Her name's Nancy. She led the music in one of the churches I was at. We went on a trip to South America, to Ecuador together. And the last little while, she's definitely been one who has shown her Trump flag very strongly, if I can say it that way. And a month or so ago, she wrote me an email that said, Pastor Jim, I got a friend request for you in Facebook. And I don't remember sending her a friend request. So I'm guessing it was just one of those that says, a friend of yours is a friend with Jim Woping. Do you want to be a friend with them? And that's what I think it probably was. But I didn't want to say, no, Nancy, I've seen what you've been posting. No way in hell I want to talk to you about that, because it's because my sense is that we need to be in those kinds of conversations, even when they're difficult. And so I said to her, let's talk. And so we've been trying to email back and forth, and it goes slow, and there's difficult issues. Like she said that one of the groups at her church were talking about, here's the issues that the fears that Biden's administration brings up. And so I just began addressing them, and I know that I'm giving some of the wrong answers from her point of view. So she asked, for example, about the economy. My sense about economy is that, from my perspective, Democratic economy has gone up slowly, but has continued to go up, where Republican economy goes high and then crashes towards the end of the administration. And so I just said that. That's my sense of it. That's why I tend to be liberal in economic things. And so she hasn't gotten back with me yet about that. But maybe we can have a conversation so she can hear, this is why I'm who I am. And she can express, this is why she is who she is.
Now, more power to you, because I'm not sure I'd be up to those kind of conversations, and be persistent with that.
The problem, though, Art, is that especially in big cities, you can specialize pretty easily, can't you? You can be only with the people that are just like you, and not really have to delve into the larger sense of who humanity is. And yet, I think we all need that larger sense of, even when it's difficult. In smaller towns where I've often lived, you have to live with the village idiot. And you have to probably interact with that person on a regular basis. In one town that I was in, that man's name was Glenn Jacobs, and he was an oddball. And first year I taught first grade, guess whose daughter was in my class? And I knew Glenn before then, but that year I had to deal with him pretty closely. Right? What made it easier is I really liked his daughter. And so if for nothing else, I was trying to give her tools to survive him. Right. And so sometimes that's what we have to do is, how do I choose love enough to be in those hard, challenging, difficult spaces? And it has to be more than just self-fulfillment. It has to be a space of community. I have to believe somehow in something larger than just myself enough. And I think that's his point in all of this, right?
I have very little experience actually in encountering people. It's mainly my own family, and occasionally it surfaces in a phone call or something. But really, I don't see any point in talking about the issues because he's hard and fast, and my brother-in-law, a very intelligent guy, just won't hear the facts that I think are facts. But so I'm much more interested just in finding out why he feels the way he does, what his fears are, what his hopes are, how he sees Trump as a solution. I mean, Bill Barr is the greatest attorney general that ever lived, and and maybe occasionally I can put in things like, well, how come Bill Barr didn't find any problems with the elections when he investigated, but Trump consisted? How do you put those together in your mind? But that's about as far as I think I can push them.
Yeah, yeah.
But mainly I wanted just to find out why, what's going on underneath in his life that made him make the choices, or push him in those directions.
Yeah.
Not discuss the end result, the issues that we disagree on.
Yeah. One of the reasons I'm more to the left than to the right was because of a young woman named Marcy. She helped me see the wonder of more of a liberal point of view, right? And I'd always had very conservative points of view growing up, where I grew up and how I grew up. Her son, who is also my son, was talking to me the other day and says, I have a really hard time talking with my mom because she is a Trump supporter right now. And so she's very much the opposite of everything that she was, that drew me to be who I became. And he's struggling the same way. How do I talk to my mother who is in that space? All right. It is hard to talk across some of these issues because Trumpism has right answers that are verifiably false. And I don't want to play the game any longer and act like I'm going to be nice when you're spouting something that has no relevance in reality. And yet it is their reality. It's tough.
I think in ways that's the new reality of the world right now. Is the what is true, and what neutral party do we both believe in based upon a, heaven forbid, research, or something, some factual basis. But so much of it is unfortunately filtered by personal experiences and who we listen to.
The good news is that 2 years ago, Marcy and I had quite a bit of occasion to talk and be together and share. You know why? Our son got in an accident, broke his back, right? And so suddenly the love for a child brought us into a space where we could talk more than what we'd been doing, absent that common ground.
Yeah.
how do we find some kind of common ground across those divides that right now are so prevalent in America?
I read a passage of it was a single paragraph, but it talked about a guy that could bring the two sides together in half an hour. The paragraph gave an illustration of abortion and the opposite sides, and they started by stating their positions, which were totally contradictory, but they wound up getting underneath where they both agreed that their goals, both sides agreed, their goals are to have children grow up in homes where they're wanted and loved.
Mm.
There they could agree. And that's the kind of thing that I look for. If I can get away from my insistence that I'm right, or proving that I'm right to the other party, but where we can really get down to what we want for our kids, or what kind of world we both want,
Yeah.
or something like that, where we can find some kind of common ground, even if our solutions aren't the same.
But it means we have to go beyond our talking points.
Yeah.
You know, the how come you're on the wrong side or I'm on the right side, and get down to a different conversation than that.
Mm-hmm.
At one point in the chapter, Rabbi Lerner talked about how most people will deny their self-blaming story. I assume because we've been taught way too much about how being weak is not what you want to be, you know? And so you can't blame yourself. It's got to be somebody else, type of thing. And he says we have to ask this question: is it reasonable to say that you created this reality? And our answer most of the time is no. But what if we have? What if we've all chosen the us against them reality? And how do we begin telling a different story than that? And how do we help both ourselves and the other person step out of that space of relative denial?
One of the things that I'm beginning to learn to do is, in a slogan, if you spot it, you got it. If I can see something in somebody else I don't like, it's probably because I have it in myself and I don't want to own up to it.
Mm-hmm.
I'd rather see it out there in them, so I can blame them for it.
Yeah.
But to recognize, when I think of Donald Trump, I think of how I'm tempted in the same way to ignore facts, to make my point, even if the facts aren't handy that I can use to back it up. The temptation is definitely there. And so I try to find the things in me that I realize we're really the same kind of people. That we're not as different as I'd want to make us out to be.
And how do we use that to be able to help, for lack of a better word, save us? He kind of uses some of that type of language, that salvation type of language. How do we allow that to happen? He talked about how in the past there was a radical the radical labor movement rose up and became part of the solution to some of the issues, and how today there's no emergence of that type of thing. What is it that can emerge in this moment that might pull us from where we're at towards something different? How is it that we somehow speak into the spaces between us, and in some of the real pain, injury that we've caused each other? How do we find something that pulls us into a space that will save this moment for us? I don't think he's quite given us the answer yet.
No.
Hmm.
But that's the essential question that he's asking, isn't it?
Yeah.
How do we get beyond all the separation? And I love that he started the title of the chapter with the word toxic, because I sure as hell know why that person's toxic. But do I know how I carry that toxicity out of whatever blaming I do, whatever powerlessness I'm working under? How is it that I'm the one who is spewing or dripping even the poison into us?
Frustration, sense of frustration and powerlessness.
Yeah, yeah. Because whether or not I recognize it, I'm pretty sure that the person I'm talking to often feels the poison that's there. You know, I don't think we hide it as much as what we think we do sometimes.
Yeah.
And I know wonderfully well that you don't have to be of the same political persuasion to have wonderful relationships. My Granny Mae was a Roosevelt Democrat, as was most of Apache County. Apache County voted Democratic for most of its history. And she told me one time, as a good Mormon woman, she said, I don't know what was worse, when my daughter Eula started smoking against Mormon regulations, or when my son James, my son James started when James became a Republican. And yet she loved her son, and her son loved her really well, even though they were of different political persuasions. So somehow that's not what they chose to separate themselves.
Well, one of the things that I've noticed I've done is drop my defenses and admit errors. For instance, deficiencies I found among Democrats, or where they know I'm not fiercely defending my side, but I can admit faults, and that really helps open the door to some extent. Or personal faults that that I used to think this way, but now I realize I was wrong, and that does lower the temperature and help to relax and open up things.
Yeah. And I'm not certain we teach that skill very well to each other right now.
Also, heaven forbid that over our lifetime, we might change, we might evolve.
Heaven forbid.
We're not static. In fact, the real issue in the world often is people who are static and hang on to something for better or for worse, because that's all they can, that of course is part of the problem in the, many of the Midwest small towns, is people are trying to hang on to why they went there in the first place. Well, that's great, except, not beyond there, then the world has changed. And what's the answer in terms of, their survival and the lifestyle they want, and frustrated and looking at anybody who will kind of listen to them somehow. And that's, of course, is one of the underpinnings of what got Trump started. Was listening to those folks that felt unlistened to or unappreciated, or written by, I'm from the big city, I know more than you do. I went to a major university, not a little, state college, and that kind of arrogance, and it's put people off, and legitimately so, because they are good folks with work hard and build something. Unfortunately, what they built is obsolete now.
Yeah. And the hard part is some of their arguments might make a difference to them, and maybe for me it's not as important. I may recognize that the the steel industry isn't coming back. I'm sorry that it used to be the core of your town, but it's just not coming back. So quit dreaming about it. But me being able to recognize that reality and then being able to live into that reality are two different things. And for me to just say I'm right and so quit your whining doesn't help much. You know, or whatever the other thing is, right? When I look at rural America, right or wrong, and when I say rural America, I mean many of my cousins who are still living up in the White Mountains, the perception, right or wrong, is that government isn't listening to their problems as much as what they want to be listened to. And I can fight that and say, you're getting as much of a voice as any of us. Or I can try to hear that in them. The hard part is I might have to do that without them returning the favor.
Yep.
Which doesn't feel like love to me. That if I have to listen to your BS, then you have to listen to mine. And that may not happen at first. And do I have the patience?
Well,
I don't know.
they're scared, and they still think they need their defenses. And I mean, if you attack my position, you're attacking me. And so they, people take it very personally. And all I can do is be more relaxed about my own positions, where I don't feel as threatened and so forth.
I think a lot of us live in
I read the things that they talk about. And my brother-in-law showed me these facts that line up on his side, and I look at them. And once in a while, I've shown them facts on my side, and says, "It's interesting, Bob. I'm quite willing to read the stuff you show me. Why aren't you interested in reading the stuff I show you?" And there's no answer, but
But my stuff is right and your stuff is crap.
yeah, you know, it's lying there, and you know that he knows he's being defensive.
Yeah.
And that he's
Art,
saying,
you were going to say something, Art.
I think, I mean, I look at my own life. I really was raised in a bubble and have been in bubbles, kind of most of my life. I've been lucky enough to be really, challenged, outside of it, a few little, but nothing, that dramatic. And I guess that's part of the challenge is then to be able to, I mean, the bubble of St. Francis. I mean, St. Francis is a bubble.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love it. I love being in the bubble of St. Francis and the way it's put together and how it's operated. But it is a bubble. And
yeah. But part of why we love a bubble is because we understand the rules of the bubble.
sure.
And we've adjusted our lives already to the expectations of that bubble.
Yeah.
As soon as you get out of that, they start bringing up things in other ways.
But and also as a bubble, we have, you look at the whole thing with gay rights and all that stuff. All that started 20 years ago in a systematic way and very research for a whole year's time. And eventually, we came to our conclusion about it, and then began the process of educating other folks about it. And it was a gradual, slow process. And but our bubble has evolved because we were not. Well, when St. Francis started, for us it was a young folks place. It was all singles people, that followed when he got appointed, and then I remember one single person who left St. Francis because it all become his dad come family with children. But she went. Found a church that had a strong singles group.
Yeah.
So again, I don't know what that tells, but it's interesting. Maybe I'm lazy. Maybe I'm just, do what I can inside the bubble and let the rest of the world bounce around outside. I don't know, you know.
But it is really difficult, because at the same time that if I'm going to define St. Francis's trajectory, re gay rights, we've gone up and gone better and better, and more of the world is kind of with us, and we feel like it's moving that direction. For somebody else, all those things that where we've progressed, they see, where the hell has this gone? And they're seeing this type of thing, and are you tearing it down? And so when our perceptions are radically different like that, it's really tough for us to be in that conversation that tries to find middle ground, because the middle ground, where is it?
And of course, the Bible does not provide us middle ground. The Bible provides us this opposite, because you can prove anything you want depending on how you read and interpret the Bible, you know.
Well, and also depending on what you rehearse about what you've read, right? If people continually show you anti-gay verses, that's what you believe the Bible says. If, you know, we tell a different set of verses over here, it's going to be hard for me to understand how anybody draws this conclusion. And yet I think that where St. Francis is at is very biblically based and very, very strongly spiritually based. Whether or not my conservative friends would agree with me. But how do you communicate that across the line?
Thank goodness you found us, we found you, you know. Heaven forbid if the bishop had assigned someone, because we're going to straighten that place out, you know.
Well, I mean, he did tell me to straighten you out. I just, just kidding. You know, that the hard part is that anything like that takes exactly what the title of the book is about. It takes revolutionary love. It takes being with each and every person in a very different way than what's easy. Right?
The conversation I had, the only one I ever had like this, but that was with a biblical conservative, and their understanding of liberals, of course, is that we keep cutting down the Bible, saying that this was not meant to be literal, all this kind of stuff, and we keep minimizing it. And I went through an approach where I talked about how exciting the Bible had become to me because of my seminary studies and how powerfully it spoke to me. And they were absolutely astonished that a liberal would find that. And I said, and I told them, frankly, when I look at the conservative way of dealing with the Bible, I don't see the power. The power disappears. It's just, you're supposed to have this rule, you're supposed to think that, and it's all kind of cut and dried and dead. But for me, it was a living, powerful thing. And that was rather astonishing to that other party.
Yeah.
Because I was standing on their ground instead of on my own in opposition.
Well, just know that I think it's that type of thing that we have to do, is we have to figure out how to find those spaces where we can stand with people across a whole lot of differences, right? Not just political differences, because that's the most remarkable thing in our world right now. But there's a lot of ways that we divide ourselves easily. Mm-hmm. And we're going to have to figure out how to do that hard work. That's why the next chapter is going to be important. Warning, it's a long chapter. It's about twice as long as the chapters before it. And here's the title of it. To change a society, you must respect its people. And right now, I definitely don't want to change because of them, because I don't feel they respect me. But I think they feel the same way about me. right? That I don't respect them, and they have some credence in that belief,
Yeah, I do.
right? And I don't want to think that I'm not respecting them, but man, it's hard to. And yet, if I can't respect why someone is anti-LGBT, even if I don't agree with them, then I can't expect them to respect me because I'm pro. If all we do is reject each other in those spaces. So that's where we're going to go next week, is we're going to try to delve into what I think is going to begin to change the conversation.
I'd like to have some additional people in the conversation. It was great, you know, there earlier, so any way of reaching out to others and finding, you know, I know, like, I think we Kay Bellman had a scheduling conflict one time, but she's not here at all. And
Yeah.
things other people is that, you know, I'd love to find out how to get them back in.
Yeah, I'll send out some things to the largest lists that I have and see who we can bring back in to do that. Because it could have been any number of things why people stayed away today. I don't know why it is.
Well, it's been dwindling from the very, I joined, this is, I think, the fourth session.
Yeah,
I
this
joined.
was the fourth session. And the tough part is excuse me, there aren't simple answers to all this. And so I get people's frustration at saying, give me the easy solution. They're not easy solutions.
How about your week time group? How many people were in that one? In the week?
There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, more or less.
Any convictions?
And so if we need to, if it feels like people are not going to come back to this session, what we may want to do is combine the two and have us move over there. I don't know how free you guys are to be able to go on Tuesday afternoon rather than Thursday night, but I agree with you. More voices definitely helps the conversation.
Well, maybe I just, you know, I prefer evening, because not that I schedule-wise problem, but it breaks up an afternoon.
Yeah.
You know, and I enjoy something to break up the evening.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would gladly, if I could be helpful in moving over there, sure. Or they could.
I'll try to contact all the people who have been here, see how many are wanting to continue, but something's happened, or you know, or whatever. And if it feels like they're not going to come back, then let's look at the other option.
I agree. Okay, thank you.
All right.
This book.
All right, my friends. Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you. Okay.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
We'll see you next week.
Okay, bye for now.